Timing will work is each question will have a total of 5 minutes. The first legislator will have 3 minutes and the second will have 2. If a third legislator would like to respond, Jennifer has left it up to my discretion with time limits and how many questions that we have if we have enough time to have a third legislator to speak towards that question. If a question is specifically requested for all 4 to give all their answers, those legislators will have 2 minutes apiece. All questions will be read. In the case of a duplicate question, I will still read the question and the person's name and city, but we will not ask for answers from the legislators because it will be a duplicate. If there are no remaining questions, an additional time can be given to the legislators at the discretion of myself for the purpose of sharing final thoughts on the legislative session and bringing the town hall to a close. Please make sure to use respectful language as no question with expletives will be read. Closing will be at 7:20 p.m. Each legislator will have 2 more minutes to provide a closing statement. The decorum for the evening will require that you please silence your phones. Please respect differences of opinion. Excessive speaking, yelling, or any behavior that interrupts the event is not allowed. If you are being disruptive to the program, you may be escorted out of the event. I say this because we want to have a smooth evening and we want to go as smoothly as possible, and we want to answer as many of your questions as we possibly can. All right? So now I would like to introduce the legislators that are going to be speaking tonight. I'll start off with Kelli Stargel with District 22. All right. And you have 2 to 4 minutes.
Good evening. Thank you very much for being here. It's always great to have an opportunity to come and talk about what we've done this legislative session. I will say of all the legislative sessions I've been a part of, and I was elected into the House for 4 years and I've served 6 years in the Senate, this was probably the most trying one that I have been a part of, emotionally, work-wise, everything. We started off session dealing with an opioid crisis, which we all thought we were focusing on, and then midway through session we had to deal with a hurricane. Not through session, but in our planning for session, dealt with hurricane and how we could help people recover from the hurricane, and then we moved from that into the issues that we had at Parkland. So it was a very difficult session, and probably one that I will remember forever on the work that we've had to do. Personally, the things that I worked on mostly, I'm the chair of the Finance and Tax Committee, so I did work on the tax package, making sure that we're able to give back as many resources as possible back to the people of the state of Florida. In the time that I've been elected, we had given back over $10 billion to constituents in the state of Florida, as well as paid down $10 billion of our debt. I have worked very hard to make sure that we keep regulations low and less regulation, personal responsibility, and then having direct oversight of our funds. So the tax package that I worked on was $160 million and direct opportunities dealing with the hurricane preparedness tax, sales tax holidays, the school sales tax holidays, making sure we had some rebates back to individuals who donate money for Habitat to Humanities, working for brownfield cleanup. Many of those things were in the tax package, and that was a piece of legislation that I had to work and bring together. Another piece of legislation that I worked on dealing with the Commissioner of Agriculture's main things that he needed to do to make sure that we had a Commissioner of Agriculture department that could do all the things that it needed to do, dealing with farm trucks. A lot of these things sound rather boring, but it was things that actually were very beneficial to help our agricultural community get back on its feet after the hurricane. We dealt with the chief financial officers, did a bill for them that made sure that every person who is in the foster care system has the opportunity to have financial literacy before they go out into the world, knowing that many of these kids who are in foster care haven't had the opportunity to have parents who would instruct and teach them. So it was worked on that, and then I also worked quite a bit on the bill that I believe we're going to have some in-depth conversation, at least it seems to be at most of my wrap-ups, dealing with the school safety. I worked a lot on the guardianship part of that bill, making sure that those pieces and parts were in place. So I'll pass on to the other senators and look forward to your questions. Senators and representatives.
Well, thank you. I'm Senator Dennis Baxley, serving Lake, Marion, and Sumter counties, and I have a great big thank you to Lake County for allowing me the opportunity. I really credit you for putting me across the top to make it over to the Senate. This was my 15th legislative session. You know, I'm kind of like George Washington, except I don't have his skill set. You know, he would come to Washington, go home for a while. They'd ask him to come back and do something, he'd go back. So I served 7 years in the House, leaving there in '07 for 3 years, and then seat open. I ran again. I did another 6 years in the House. Then the Senate seat opened here, and I ran 2 more in the Senate. So after 15 sessions, I can tell you every one of them has its unique characteristics. People often ask, well, what determines policy in elections more than anything? And a much wiser man told me, events. Events, things happen, and you have to respond to them. And so we do have events that affect it, and as outlined by the good senator, first of all is the reality of the opioid crisis, where we have about 17 people a day dropping dead from overdose. And we did devote a lot of work to that, and about $50 million of trying to improve that arena. Irma, we never had a hurricane that covered the whole state at one time and crushed on us. And we learned a lot from that. And we did a lot about the impacts of that, the hardening of that. We also saw some good things that had come out of preparation and been done over the years since the last 9 hurricanes we had about 10 years ago. So next was one nobody wants to really talk about much, but we had a big to-do about sexual harassment issues, particularly in the Senate. It curried, wound up a couple of senators actually resigned with situations. To me, it's very simple. I learned it in preschool. Keep your hands to yourself. And be nice. And be respectful. It's that simple, but we may have to do more, and I think we ought to be contemplative about how we do that. I'm not afraid to address that. It's a real issue, but it's a real issue in our culture that's come to light. Those are events. Parkland changed everything. It's the first real school shooting I've seen of this nature, massacre in Florida in my lifetime. And we had to assess what that all meant. And it was a huge emotional impact on the entire state and the country. So those are the big things that happened that kind of shaped the session. There was about 3,200 bills filed, so you can imagine trying to follow all that, plus all the things that get amended. We wound up passing only about 200. You should be glad about that. If there's anything important that I do for you, it's kill bills. It's easier to kill stuff than to pass stuff, and if we pass too much stuff, you don't have any liberty left. My core values are about protecting faith, family, freedom, opportunity. Almost everything I do has something to do with protecting those. I filed about 42 bills in the Senate. About 13 of those passed. There are a list of those. I'm not going to trail through them for you. I will tell you a couple of them that I feel particularly strongly about. One of them has to do with free speech. We have this thing sweeping the country that free speech is about giving a little free speech zone, and we're not going to do that. We outlawed that on our university campuses. Free speech and a designated zone are antithetical. That, and I'll talk about subpoena investigations when I have a little more time. Very honored to serve with this astute body. You have a great delegation. These are wonderful people to work on stuff with. Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I want to stand up. I do better when I'm on my feet here, and I can see you better as well. Can everybody hear me all right with this mic? Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to be here, and I want to thank Chair Sullivan for organizing this town hall meeting for the 2nd year in a row, which is an official meeting of the Lake County Legislative Delegation, and I appreciate her hard work and that of her staff in making this happen. I'm in a somewhat unique position here on the delegation. I'm the one who's term limited. I'm not coming back to the legislature after my term is up. And so these fine people will be serving you in the future, and I will not be in the legislature actually after June 30th. I'm sure most of you know that Governor Scott appointed me to become a judge of the 5th Judicial Circuit Court. So that makes me feel as though this delegation meeting or workshop or town hall meeting is a farewell for me, and that's what I'm really here to say to you. I want to thank you for all of your past courtesies in this county. I've served in public office since 2004, 6 years as a school board member, and now 8 years as a House member. and I'm embarking on another journey now, thanks to Governor Scott. I really appreciate the governor's confidence in me that he would appoint me. He handed me the letter personally on the last day of session in the chamber in front of all of my colleagues. I didn't know that was coming. I really was quite surprised. The letter says, "Dear Representative Metz, it is my pleasure to appoint you to the 5th Judicial Circuit Court. Your appointment is evidence of my utmost confidence in your ability to serve with excellence and distinction. Congratulations and thank you for your continued willingness to serve the people of Florida." Well, I want to thank the governor for having the confidence in me to let me serve the people of Florida as a circuit judge. Now that also, though, limits me in terms of my participation in this meeting today, because I can't really talk about things that would compromise my ability to be a fair and impartial judge beginning on July the 1st. And that's when I do start replacing Judge Law, who's retiring June 30th. So my resignation from the House is effective at the end of the day on June 30th. So I'm a House member until then, and I've already been appointed to the court. And the people in the judicial branch are calling me Judge Metz, which is hard to get used to. I don't feel like I'm a judge. I'm still a practicing attorney winding down my practice right now. So I come in here and they call me representative again. And it's a little bit confusing to have different titles applied to you. But Larry always works, by the way. So I just want to say thank you to everybody. It's been an honor to serve in the House since 2010. I really appreciate everything that everyone's done to help me represent them and give me good information to act on. I really have to limit my comments today. The other folks can respond to the questions that I can't respond to. And if anyone wants to get really good information on a bill, we have the ability to get you a copy of the bill or the bill analysis, which has a lot of good information that the professional staff determined as they were working the bill up for hearing in front of committees and in front of the floor. So if anyone wants anything specific about any bill, please let my aide know. I want to introduce her, Hannah Duchesne. Hannah, would you please stand up? Hannah's my legislative aide, does a fantastic job in supporting my efforts as a legislator. And let her know if you want a copy of a bill or a bill analysis, and she can email that to you tomorrow. So with that, I would just like to conclude by saying I didn't have the most successful session because a lot of the bills that I sponsored passed the House, but then didn't make it through the Senate. But the two bills that made it through the process entirely, one was the Deployed Parents Custody and Visitation Act. It's a uniform law act that applies to service members who are deployed in the military that have child custody issues arise, and puts Florida in line with other states that have adopted the Uniform Act, making it easier for these service members to make modifications to their arrangements when they go on deployment. So there's a very easy provision for an agreement that they can enter into, or if they can't agree, then they can get in front of the court for a modification. So that was one bill that passed and was signed into law by Governor Scott. And the other bill was a local bill that abolishes the South Lake County Hospital District effective October 1 of 2019 and provides transitional provisions for the from now until that dissolution date so that they can wind things up. So that concludes my remarks. I look forward to hearing more from you, but I'm not able to answer a lot of the questions, and I apologize in advance if I defer. It's not because I didn't want to, but it's because I feel duty-bound not to answer certain questions. Thank you very much.
Well, good evening. I want to thank each of you for being here this evening and being engaged in this process. We've all worked very hard to be able to come back and report what we've been doing. And I also want to give a quick shout out to Ms. Sharon Neary, my Chief Legislative Aide, and Morgan Hahnfeldt, my District Aide, who have done a great deal of work this evening to make this possible. So thank you very much. As a refresher from those of you who know, and perhaps there's some new people in the crowd, I represent House District 31, which includes a large portion of Lake County and a portion of Orange County, that's most all of Apopka. And this was my second term, my fourth session, so I'm halfway through the process now. And every day is a new adventure. It is such a privilege to get to serve you. The issues that we face oftentimes are very challenging, but with challenge, we're met with much opportunity, and that's what I enjoy working on, providing those opportunities. I started this session serving on Ed Innovation Committee, K-12 Appropriations, was Vice Chair of Full Education, and Criminal Justice, as well as Public Integrity and Ethics. 2 weeks into committee weeks, I was moved from what we call a PI, Public Integrity and Ethics, and was moved to the chairmanship position of Oversight, Transparency, and Administration, and moved off of K-12 approach and on to government accountability, which is a large committee that sits above my subcommittee chairmanship. So I had some new policy silos I got to work in this year, as well as some new leadership opportunities to better serve you through. I sponsored 10 bills this year, 3 of which passed both the House and Senate and were signed into law by the governor. 7 of which, well, I should start by saying all 10 actually passed the House, and then 3 out of those 10 went on to become a law. And so I'll start with the 7 that only passed the House, and I'm just going to go over my personal bills now. However, I will preface that with saying we'll have many questions later on, I know, about the public safety bill that's on most people's minds, and so I'm going to wait till those questions to address that, because I also want to have an opportunity right now to share with you the bills that I personally sponsored. And so the first of which was HB 733, Contraband in County Facilities. This came to me from the Orange County Sheriff's Office. They uniquely the county uniquely runs their county jail, not the sheriff's office. However, when sheriffs are called in, they're currently not able to search those cell phones that are found to be on the possession of inmates, which creates a huge security liability because, first of all, they're not supposed to have any contraband, most especially a cell phone, in the jail system. So that's what that bill did. HB 1035 had to do with personalized education, working to lessen the learning gaps. How many of you have ever heard of Khan Academy or used Khan Academy for your children, grandchildren? Okay, so something he really focuses on is the learning gap. Well, only 1 minute left. Okay, then I'm just going to jump to the 3 that actually passed, which was home education, helping our home schooled students, early learning coalitions, which enabled coalitions to deny a contract with a child care provider that had a first degree violation, which is leaving the child in a hot vehicle, leaving them in water unattended. Currently, they couldn't deny those contracts, and state funds were going to make sure those providers were still in operation. So past that, and then 1279, which is School District Accountability, which was a huge oversight transparency reform of our school board system and creating an online web tool for parents to view their individual schools and compare how the money is being spent per pupil, the admin costs for student population, other schools, and there's many other things. So with that, it's time, and I'm looking forward this evening to answering your other questions.
Perfect. All right, I just want to remind everybody, if you came in after the announcement, there are cards in the back that you can fill out to speak. We need your name and your city, and it needs to be legible and big enough for me to read. So, all right, we're going to get started. The first question is from Sterling Fry from Claremont. I would like to discuss the issue of snipe sign use throughout Central Florida and beyond as well. Snipe signs. The signs on the side of the road.
Illegal posting of campaigns.
That flap, that say, I'm going to say Verizon or, you know.
Other people.
Different flapping signs outside.
Yard signs.
Yes. Yes.
The illegal signs.
I will just say there was no issue brought before us that I know that we've had to deal with that. I think that's probably more of a local ordinance issue. With your cities and counties. That's not something that was brought to my attention as a concern. But if there is a problem with that, let us know, and it's something to look forward to next year.
Okay.
Can I discuss it?
There's no discussion tonight. It's just questions and answers with what you wrote down, and they'll answer the questions. If you want to fill out another one, we can read that. But there will be no discussion from the audience tonight.
Well, I was under the understanding that you gave 5 minutes for somebody to talk.
5 minutes for the legislator to talk.
Well,
To answer the question. So if you want to ask another question, you can fill up another sheet, and we'll read it.
let me ask this question. Is it
No,
possible
no, sir.
for me to make an appointment with them to discuss it?
That's what you would need to do if you want to discuss it with them one-on-one. That's not what we're doing here tonight.
Okay.
Okay?
I'm sorry, I misunderstood.
That's okay.
Our staff members are back here.
Yeah, they'll talk to you.
Get an appointment or get information to us. Debbie Dennis is my chief legislative aide right here. Alex Bickley, if you want to talk to them. And maybe we should all introduce who our people are so they know who to go to.
Would all the aides like to step forward and raise your hand so everybody can see who you are? And we ask if you're going to have a conversation if you step into the kitchen or maybe outside so it's not disrupting the event.
And I will also add, as the new incoming chair of the Lake County Delegation, we will be having a delegation meeting, which will be the opportunity as well to have the feedback of information that you'd like us to have leading into session. But I believe Representative Sullivan, in the structure of this, was more of a question and answer type of a meeting.
Okay, thank you. The next question is from Mickey Meyer from Lake Pansofsky. And I always say this wrong, so please forgive me. Will you help us abating? Okay. Of Florida, Lake County Chapter, secure money from the Schlossberg Fund in order to help us provide materials for our free motorcycle safety and awareness, and that's in quotes. Classes that we provide to our local high schools, utility supplies, and I can't read it, something groups. So, civic groups, thank you.
I'm a doctor, I write like
I can't read my dad's handwriting either. It's all right.
Well, thank you. It's great to have Abate here, and I'm looking forward to coming and speaking to your club in a few weeks. But absolutely, I know we each had the opportunity to fill out different appropriations and submit those. So I know I personally, as long as with the rest of us, are always open to hearing different needs in the community and ways that we can be of assistance. And so would definitely be willing to talk about those opportunities and the resources needed and the best path to go. And also looking if that's even a needed appropriation or looking in other local departments of government and if there's some small grants or other areas locally that we can help fund that.
Can I speak to it?
That issue's been around for me for a while, and I have advocated for it every year. And it is one of the casualties of term limits, I think, that some people don't know the whole history of how that was formed and why it was formed and how it was paid for out of the license plates of motorcyclists. And so I think it's going to be an education process for people to understand that again, and then evaluating maybe making some changes to how we deliver safety information. But I am pledged to continue. The price of freedom is eternal vigilance. Thank you.
Amen.
Thank you.
Since that was fairly short, does anybody else want to add their comments? Okay. All right, we have, is Elizabeth Kapoor here?
Yes.
Can you step up to Morgan, and she has a question for you. Can you come talk to Morgan for me? All right, Marie Dubois from Howie in the Hills asks, can you explain how raising the age to buy long rifle to 21 and having a 3-day wait period will prevent future mass shootings?
Thank you. I was one of the senators who did vote for the gun safety bill, or the school safety bill, I'm sorry, that we had. And just so it's clear, that was not necessarily one of the ideas that I had put into the bill. What I had promoted and worked very hard on was the Guardian program so that we could have a sustainable opportunity to have somebody at that school who has the ability, the training, the knowledge, and multiple people actually would be, in my opinion, would be preferred on those campuses to help protect these children. But at the moment of what happened, what we dealt with Parkland was a very emotional situation. And these kids came up and they were very strong in what they wanted to accomplish. And they basically said, we need you to do something. Moving the age to 20, nothing, just so I think everyone is clear, multiple laws were broken with the individual that went in and shot up that school. And you're never going to be able to write a law that is going to stop lawbreakers. And I think we all recognize that. And that was not my goal, and supporting that legislation was not my goal to stop. That we're going to do the best that we can. But also recognizing when we wrote that legislation, we put into it parameters to make sure, basically we don't want a situation like that child I guess not really a child, who went in and shot that school, who was an isolated situation, who had been through a litany of mishaps that had happened in the community, with the sheriff's department, with the school system. So we came in to eliminate what we could. Moving the age to 21, I want to clarify that does not prevent any child, any person over the 18, even under the age of 18 actually, from possessing, using, owning, having anything with a weapon. They just cannot physically go to the store and buy it. So they're still going to have the full opportunity to protect themselves, to have a weapon, to go hunting. In fact, we even changed it to say that if you had the gun license, gun training course, you would have the opportunity to be able to get your to not have to go through the 3-day waiting period. So just so it's clear, those laws were not put in place to stop it, but what we were trying to do was target and specifically find those individuals who were struggling, who would go and the same day try to get that weapon and do something that they shouldn't be doing with it.
I want to echo Senator Stargel's sentiments and also expand on a few items. I think in and of itself, there was nothing about moving the age in and of itself that will prevent other shootings. We know that 98% of mass shootings occur in gun-free zones. And so I think what's really important in view of this legislation is nothing in life you can take with a very narrow perspective. You can't just zoom in on one aspect of this bill and not look at the greater whole of what we actually passed. I think it's unfortunate how much misinformation has been spread out there in regards to what this bill does or doesn't do. And so I think that's what we hope to correct tonight and make the record straight and giving much needed information. We didn't prevent an 18, 19, or 20-year-old from owning a weapon. We did not prevent an 18, 19, 20-year-old from using a weapon, nor did we prevent an 18, 19, or 20-year-old from purchasing a gun privately. They can still do all of those things. There's a huge misconception that because in the statute of law where public sales, licensed sales of gun licensed sales take place, that because it says that no weapons can be sold to someone under the age of 21, that included private sale as well. But that's not the case. When you write policy, it's very important where you're putting that policy in statute. In order to have affected private sale, we would have had to address that chapter of statute in the bill. And that chapter of statute was never even pulled into the bill. Additionally, I think what's very important is that in this bill was a guardian program. And that is going to give the opportunity to teachers to be armed and to no longer have a gun-free zone in our public schools, should counties choose to vote. And that is a huge win for Second Amendment rights and for the ability to secure the safety for our children. Every opportunity in the past 4 years that I've had the opportunity to abolish a gun-free zone or to throw a rock in it to make it go away, I voted for that, and I've been consistent in this bill. Okay,
just in case somebody's walked in since we started, I'll repeat myself that there are sheets in the back you can fill out if you'd like to ask a question. The next question comes from Claire Clarkson and Ainsley Homich from Tavares. Why is Lake County considering guns in schools? State your reason.
Well, that's state.
It's not a repeat.
That's a local county.
I can speak to the guns in school discussion because that's what we've been hearing quite a bit about. And what they're talking about is the Guardian program. What we did with this bill is we allowed individuals who volunteered, who wanted to go through an additional 130 hours, 130, increase a little bit more, worth of training, have the opportunity to become sworn officers, to be able to come back to our schools and be able to carry a weapon and for the sole purpose of active shooter situation. We currently have the ability for school resource officers to be on school campuses right now. Those individuals are allowed to carry a gun on those campuses, so that can happen today. What the Guardian program allowed is we don't have, if today we had unlimited resources and we could and funded it, we still would not have the manpower necessary to have school resource officers on every campus. And right after the Parkland situation happened, we also at the same time had a lot of bomb threats, various different things that were happening across our state, and kids were afraid to go to school. And we were not going to let that continue to happen. As a parent of 5 kids, I can't imagine being afraid to send my child to school. So we had to do something that increased the ability for safety on those campuses, and that's what the Guardian program does. It doesn't, no teacher has to be a guardian. It's only for those individuals who've gone through the training and who've been our sworn officers. In addition to that, we also passed legislation this year that I was a part of that said that if you are a former military and you have come back to the community and you want to be a principal, we've given you an expedited path, recognizing that we have individuals in our that are trained in leadership, they can be principals. Can you imagine being a principal of the school, had years of service in the active military, now you're a principal of the school and you're not allowed to have a weapon to defend those students on that campus? This bill allowed that to happen, but it's only voluntary. It's only if the person wants to go through the training. It's only if the person has had this training and is actually a sworn deputy. It's not concealed carry on the campus. So we're making sure that the right people have been trained or on those campuses, and it allows them that opportunity. And each of our school districts are having to individually decide if they want to accept the Guardian program or if they want to continue to attempt to protect their schools with a school resource officer, which is expensive, and unfortunately we don't have the manpower.
If you are exclusively a classroom teacher, you cannot be a volunteer for this. It is only for people that have mixed roles of being it. They already have safety responsibility for the students, either as administrators or they might be a coach or somebody that may be teaching a class. But for all those people that are exclusively classroom teachers, they do not even qualify under this program. My biggest fear is it's going to be underutilized. This is all about the first 5 minutes, people. 5 minutes. Whether something is an incident or becomes a massacre. No one, no law enforcement can take over and protect you from that. What they do is come in and try to apprehend, restore order, and rescue. Set up a perimeter. But in that first 5 minutes, what we're dealing with is the fact that we're operating with an illusion. That illusion is called gun-free zone. Imagine a big circle, all of us who live by the rules, concealed weapon permit holders and everybody else. Whatever the rules are, we're going to live with it, okay? Look at a little tiny circle. These are the people who perpetrate these violent acts. They don't care what your rules are now. They're already violating all the rules. And so it doesn't make sense to me that by taking away the rights of all these people who live by the rules, we're somehow changing this subset. But we simply must change. And it only takes a little bit. It only has to be a couple of people that are prepared to respond. But they have to respond within seconds, minutes. And you've got rural counties in this state. It may be 20 minutes before somebody gets there. And if it's a very rural county, there is no SWAT team coming because they don't have it. And so it's to empower people to take responsibility for themselves and others who already have safety responsibility for these students. So no, we're not trying to hand out firearms to all the teachers and tell them to guard your kids. That's such a misrepresented narrative. This is about empowering people. I have people write me letters who administrators, trained military, came out, went into education, and they're wearing handcuffs. They said, I know what to do, but I can't defend my kids.
Senator Baxley, time's up, sorry.
I can give you more.
It's on a roll. Did you want?
To that, I would add, we added $97 million in this year's budget for school resource officers so that every school could have at least one school resource officer, because there were some schools, especially in rural districts, where you had one school resource officer and they were traveling to multiple different schools throughout the day. So in our budget, in the funding of the $97 million, now there's one in every school. Additionally, the requirements specifically, so you know, to be a school guardian, you have to hold a valid concealed carry license. You have to successfully complete 132 hours of firearm safety and proficiency training. You have to pass a psychological evaluation, pass a drug test, successfully complete ongoing firearms training, at least annual. Complete at least 12 hours of diversity training using a nationally recognized program, and a school guardian has law enforcement authority only to the extent necessary to prevent or abate an activity, assailant incident on school premises.
Okay.
Ma'am? I'm having angst because I didn't answer an earlier question, and that had to do, will these gun restrictions in this bill change anything behaviorally? And I feel like I have to address that, if I could, please.
Can you do that in your final comments?
I will.
Okay, thank you. All right, the next question comes from Christine Cruz from Eustis. She asked, what type of conservation efforts are you leading for our lakes, rivers, canals, and waterways? Are you now, or would you consider in the future the banning of plastic straws and bags, or tax incentives for businesses who use biodegradable options?
No. I I think those are overreactions. And, you know, we have to do is re-educate people. We have to work on cleanups. We just granted about $16 million in cleanup opportunities to protect our springs, our water supplies. Yes, we have a huge effort for conservation. But going around picking up straws is, and I'm sorry, I know there's a whole argument for that and people that believe that's the way to do business. But we don't need more restriction. We need more understanding of how to take care and treasure what we have. And that, which piece of trash it is doesn't matter. There's a lot of different forms of plastics. And so to pick on a straw, I think it's oversimplifying the challenge. I know it's well intended, but it's just getting too much into personal liberty.
I think personal responsibility is key in this, and awareness, and people being a good steward of the environment. I think we can certainly, as legislators, lead by example, and that goes to what we fund. And I will say from what I voted on and supported this year in this year's session was over $4 billion for our environment, specifically the Everglades restoration. We put $248 million towards the springs restoration, $50 million. We have some beautiful springs that are here in Lake County and in Seminole County that are a great natural resource to us. And we have a responsibility to make sure that those are kept for future generations. In regards to beach restoration projects, we spent over $61 million as a legislature, over $30 million on individual water projects within people's districts, and hazardous waste cleanup, we spent $123 million. So you can see we're not just talking about this, we're putting money towards it, and we're working on solutions to be good stewards of our environment.
Okay, the next question comes from Pamela Dreyer. She's from Leesburg. She asks, what policy passed or didn't pass are you most excited about? Go for it.
Well, I'm most excited that we passed one bill that we need to pass, and that was a balanced budget, which apparently Washington can't do. And I'm so proud of the financial stability because of the consistent leadership of the state. We lead the entire nation in the financial stability of our state government. We serve, one of my roles as chairman of Government Oversight and Accountability is to produce with the actuaries what our FRS, our Florida Retirement System numbers will be for the year of how we're putting that in. And we're very, very cautious about that. We don't want it. We have one of the best systems in the entire country. It still has some unfunded liability, but it is in excellent shape compared to most funds around the state. So that budget that covered all these areas, that did fund the environment, that did fund school safety, that did fund opioid crisis, that did fund schools and health care, but also our budget, $88 billion. Now that's grown from $52 billion when I started. But you know our budget is half, almost half the size of New York's, and we have more people than they do now. Why do people love Florida? Because it's a great place to live, work, and play, and grow a business. Why? Because it's been intentional leadership and conservative management of our resources. Do we do everything everybody wants to do? No. But that's how we keep you able to keep more of your own money instead of taking it and saying it's our money to redistribute. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, the question I think asked about what I'm excited about, and I don't get excited very easily. I shouldn't be answering this question. But I mentioned to you in my opening the South Lake County Fiscal District bill that has been approved by the governor, and it will dissolve the district in October 1st, 2019. I will add to what I said earlier that bill, because it dissolves the district, the tax that the district collects now, roughly 0.7 of a mil on the properties in South Lake County, will no longer be collected. So it's about a $5 million tax cut for the property owners in South Lake County. And that will be for that first year and onward into the future forever. The money that they would be collecting will not be collected. So that was the goal of the bill. It had the unanimous support of the delegation. It had the unanimous support of the House and the Senate, both all the committees as well as the floor votes. And it had the support of the district itself. To their credit, they came forward and they actually supported the bill after I started working on it. So I will just say, although I don't appear excited about that, I am very grateful that we had that bill pass, because it will provide the tax relief to the citizens of South Lake County that I represent. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry. You're allowed to do that. All right, the next question comes from Catherine Williamson from Leesburg. She asks, Florida is failing our children. Please explain how 47 cents per student will fix this, and if not, what you propose.
Well, I'm not sure where you're getting the 47 cents because we fund at just over $7,000 per student in our education system. This year, that's part of our FEFP. And this year, we increased that by another $103 per student. Additionally, in the past 4 years, we've worked on a lot of things to circumvent the union. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the teachers union, but oftentimes when we try to give pay raises to teachers based on those who are exceeding and doing well and deserve a raise, the union has a way of coming in and giving it marginally to everyone. And so the Best and the Brightest program, which I will admit that I actually voted against. I was one of the few Republicans 2 or 3 years ago that voted against it, worked to reform it and make it more accessible to more teachers, and then after I reformed it, voted for it. That gives our teachers a greater salary, and also now we have the Best and Brightest principal fund that pays them a higher amount and also gives them more autonomy as a principal if they're succeeding as a school and less onerous regulations. There's a lot that we did, whether it was with the Hope Scholarship, whether it was one of the things that I personally worked on here in Lake County was the Leesburg Construction Academy, and that gives almost $1 million for students in high school to get certifications to get better jobs. So that there's a lot that we're doing. That's not what you're going to hear the media say. That's not what you're going to hear posted a lot about. But I can tell you as someone who's spent a great deal of time in education and spends a lot of time in our schools and speaking with teachers, that we're doing a lot to improve not only our public education, but your opportunity as a parent to choose the best fit, whether that's private, public, home education, online education, and to give you the tools to meet your student where they're at.
Thank you. And I'll just add a few comments to that. And that there was a report that came out yesterday, the National Assessment of Educational Progress, where we all compare state by state how we've done. Only 2 states across the nation are improving in their scores. Florida is one of them. So to say that we're failing our kids, I don't think that's an accurate comment. There's also written into that question the fact that the people who spend the most have the best educational outcomes, and that's not accurate either. It's what we do with those dollars. But we are funding our education. We have a constitutional mandate to fund kids adequately and equally across the state of Florida, which we do. We've done a lot in the last few years to make sure that we have a lot of educational choice and options, that we have a lot of variety in education, and to make sure that those kids have a lot of opportunity going forward. I've been a huge advocate for educational choice. But in addition to that, there were years back when many years ago when Senator Baxley was first in the House, that we were I think as low as 48th in education. We've moved all the way up to 6. We've continued to improve. What we did were so effective that show basically went on the road, and other states started doing what Florida was doing. Making sure that 3rd graders knew how to read before they moved into 4th grade. Making sure that we rated our schools with an 8.0 which was something that people could actually understand and know if our schools were doing well. Other states started doing that. Other states started to rise as well. We've continued with that, though, with our policies. Our gap between our minority and English language learners has closed throughout the year. Our AP scores have gone up. Our students have done better across the state, and consequently, the United States as a whole has risen in the international form of education. So I would not say that our educational systems are failing.
If you really break out the budget, the 2 biggest expenditures we make are education and healthcare. And so I know that it's gotten very hard and demanding, and I know that in many ways the job is much harder. But now no one talks about they shouldn't be accountable or shouldn't grade a school. We've accepted that there's a certain accountability, and it's hard. It's very hard work to change the future. But to keep on this mantra that we don't fund education. I was looking at a couple of the counties. I can't remember the total here at Lake, but I was looking at Marion County schools who, still feel drastically underfunded, is their expression. $537 million. That means in a 2-year period, we spent over $1 billion of your money. We have to take that money from you. You know, we don't have money up there. We predict what you're going to send us, and then we distribute it. And so it may never be enough. It may never be enough appreciation for these hardworking people. But the fact is, you are making a tremendous investment in the future in education dollars. And I will tell you that one of the things that has bothered me is how in this distribution, these compression models and district cost differentials that are part of the logarithm of how some of these things get distributed out of the Florida Education Plan's budget. We saw about 15 mid-sized counties, and he and I have been working on this, and this whole table has, for several years, because we'd see money move to the big cities and away from our system. Well, thanks to some leadership, and I particularly give credit to our appropriations chairman for pushing on this in negotiation with the House, we improved that compression model to where it moved about $4 million back to Lake County and about $7 million back to Marion, and I forget what it did to Sumter. Sumter always has a little different model because they're heavily set with the...
Senator Baxley, I'm sorry, your time's out.
So, yeah, I'm spending your money there.
Thank you. All right, the next question comes from Jared Broadhurst. He's from Leesburg. And he asks, the school safety bill, SB 7026, does not address the primary problem at Parkland, the Promise program. Lawmakers believe they can solve a problem with money in bills. The $400 million is a huge waste because Promise program was ignored.
I'm not super familiar with what the Promise program is. If that's the program, though, that was saying that we can't punish children, then I would agree there are some things that we need to do, and I hope to move. And just so everyone understands as well, the bill 7026 was a start on a lot of these subject matters, but one of the things we did focus on was the students in education. Excuse me, I'm trying to fight off the cold here. Students in education who are having mental disabilities and struggles with emotional issues, and we put quite a bit of money in the bill to deal with that. But what I want to do moving forward, and the teachers in the room will understand, we've changed a lot over the last few years. A lot of it came from the federal government on the IDEA program and how we deal with our students with disabilities. And those students with disabilities also have a classification of emotional and behavioral disability. So when we wrote the laws, I say we, when the federal government wrote the laws dealing with the students with disabilities, it treated a child that may have Down syndrome or spinal bifida or whatever unique abilities the same as the children with these emotional and behavioral disabilities. And if a student's acting in accordance with their disability, our teachers' hands tend to be tied. And I'm going to look at that and see how we can fix that. There's a thing called Rule 6, which looks at how these students are treated. You cannot expel them from school for more than 10 days or they come back. We don't have the ability to discipline the children. We don't have the ability to work within the families because it said they're acting within accordance of their disability, which is an emotional and behavioral disruption. I'm not supportive of coddling and allowing a child who's misbehaving and moving to that level to be able to remain in the classroom, or if they do remain in the classroom, not getting them the specific help they need to deal with their issues so they don't turn into students who do things like Parkland or Columbine or shoot up a movie theater or even feel compelled to join a gang or join ISIS. We need to start getting into our schools, recognizing these kids and helping them and their entire family unit, because that's the problem. We've had a breakdown of the family. We don't have the family unit we used to have in the past. So unfortunately, we as a village, is what used to be said years ago, which is never something I supported, because I strongly support the family. But we need to be able to support these families that have had a breakdown to come in and help these children so that they don't grow up to be the kids who would do this type of thing. So I'm planning to work on that going forward, and I do not support the Promise program that says that you don't punish a child because they're a child, because they're doing adult crimes.
I would like to speak to the fact that much has been done, and I've been a part of it with others at this table, to try to divert kids from getting deeper in the system, because once they get labeled, once they get in-house, they're pipelined to DOC, at great expense to you, I might add. And so we have tried to concertedly deal with their earlier behaviors in a way that we don't destroy their future. But at the same time, when these are criminal acts and you're burying the evidence, this is what there's some reason to believe may have been going on just to affect the numbers so they could drive down the numbers, then we're not using those numbers for the right thing. Because there also has to be accountability. And if you do certain things, part of that learning and getting diverted a different path is to be held accountable. So that has been part of that problem. But in that bill, I'm going to use this time to tell you that while I thought there was a tremendous amount of good in this bill, a substance that needed to be done, I did not see that any of these restrictions on people's rights to bear arms, a constitutional right, that this improved the situation. And for those reasons, I did not vote for it, even though it was a very important issue.
Okay, Sarah Beth Klassen from Tavares asked, what credible evidence can you provide that supports arming school personnel? Research indicates that increased guns on campus pose an increased risk to students, teachers, law enforcement. Zero tolerance policy has been proven repeatedly to ineffectively in reducing gun violence. Why are these proposed solutions? Please back up with evidence, not opinion. Thank you.
Well, great question. So I'll start with the fact that it's evidence and it's proven, and it was written in actually an article that I read the other day by USA Today. I was surprised they actually posted something by Conservative that was factually backed, though, that 98% of mass shootings occur in gun-free zones. In 2015, in France, who has extensive gun control measures, there were more mass shootings that occurred in France in 2015 than in the entire 8 years that President Barack Obama was our president. We've seen time and time again that extensive gun control does not solve anything. Look at Chicago. It's a perfect example. But what we do know is arming people who have the experience, who have the knowledge, who are well equipped, they present a deterrent. Because right now our children are sitting ducks. People know. Now we know, unfortunately, there is evil in this world. And there are hateful people. And there are people that want to hurt our children. And that's unfortunate. And I would say, as Senator Stargel said, that it's a breakdown of the family. And it all starts in our own home. But because that's the case, we have a responsibility as a government to make sure that we're protecting those children. And keeping an environment that is free from guns, free from armed officers protecting our students, that's putting a target on their back. So that's how we know. I also think that you can look at statistically across the U.S., again, I just reiterate, where these mass shootings have been, even recently in Florida. And it's in gun-free zones.
I would also like to add just a little bit that, and maybe you saw yesterday in London, they have a gun-free zone in England. London, they said that actually knives were causing all of the problems there, and there's actually, the actual quote was, there's no logical reason to have a knife. So, you know, if it's not guns, it's going to be the next thing, and if you get rid of the next thing, it's going to be the next thing. And I will say it again, and I will own the comment that I made on the Senate floor that I have been attacked repeatedly for. I'm sorry, it's the evil from within the individual, and that's what we have to attack. That's not to say we sit in our hands and only pray that it goes away. That's not what we're doing. That's not what we've ever done. We've passed comprehensive legislation, but truly we need to just figure out a way to tackle the evil from the individual, and it's not the weapon.
We're going to go on to the next one because we're running short on time. I have a lot of questions left. Cheryl Hall from Claremont asks, if 18 to 20-year-olds are not able to buy through a gun dealer, retail, or manufacturer with a background check, but are able to buy a gun from a private owner without a background check, how will this restriction prevent even one mass shooting by a young person? Since lawmakers are saying this was a bad bill, what was your rush to push it through and make gun restrictions that will have no power to prevent even one mass shooting?
I didn't vote for it. Somebody else have to answer that.
I'm sorry, the beginning part of that question was talking about how we've allowed people to have the weapon. It goes back to my original comment. We're not going to be, no law is going to stop a lawbreaker. None of them. We didn't rush this through. I would say we spent more hours on this legislation than any other piece of legislation that I can remember working on. It was done in a condensed period of time. But what I was not going to do without leaving the legislature doing something, you had an uproar across our country. Our students were not feeling safe. They were not wanting to go to school. Parents were not feeling safe. So we put in place school resource officers. We put in place the guardian program so that we can have more people at our schools who are able to protect the students. We put in money to deal with the mental state of our individuals. We put in place something our sheriff's office have been looking for, which is a gun violence restraining order, which is very similar to how we do a regular restraining order for an individual that's threatening a person that they live with. We put a lot of those things into place. I was not going to leave the legislature and have not done something to make the individuals of our state of Florida feel safe, because they were not feeling that way at the moment we were working on this legislation.
I'd also like to take the opportunity and the audience, because I know we've had a lot of questions on this, we'll have a lot more. By a show of hands, who has read the 105-page bill? Okay. Awesome. So we've got a couple. That's great. There's a sign-up sheet on the back if you would like to be emailed the electronic copy of that bill. Because I have read all 105 pages of that bill. It actually has 52 sections and 2,851 lines. And I've read it thoroughly. And I know what's in it. And it helps to know what's in it. And I think what's important to note in this bill is that people want to focus on the raising the age. And there's an argument to be had there. I didn't vote for the bill lightly. I honestly wish it didn't have that provision in there. I think to have an honest conversation that raising that age in and of itself is not going to prevent a shooting, just like banning weapons isn't going to prevent a shooting, because an individual who's intent on evil is going to do that. But what we can do is we can prevent students from dying if someone does decide to go shoot a school by arming teachers and getting rid of gun-free zones and giving the mental health funding that we need through the Guardian program and so many other things that we did in this bill. So I think you're looking at really just half of the bill if you only focus on that section. And I think it's really important to look at all the good. I'll be honest, it's frustrating at times to go to a meeting where so much time is spent talking about how excited people are about this Guardian program, and then on the flip side, people are so angry about this provision. I understand your disappointment. I'm disappointed that that provision was in the bill too, but I couldn't in good conscience not vote for this bill, knowing the lives that it has the potential to save because of this Guardian program. So I hope that you'll recognize that without the gun provisions in there, we wouldn't have had the votes to get the Guardian program. And I think that at the end of the day, 18, 19, and 20-year-olds can still own arms, they can still bear arms, and they can still buy them. So what right did we take away? We put a restriction, and I'll be intellectually honest about that. We put restrictions on, but we didn't take away.
Okay, the next question is from Elizabeth Kapoor from Leesburg. For 2 years, Florida's legislature refused to fund Florida Forever, as required by votes when they overwhelmingly adopted Amendment 1 in 2014. This year they allocated only $101 million when the amount should have been closer to $800 million. Why do you ignore the will of 75% of the voters? I just asked the question.
Well, I would just say, when you put it in that context, you're really not looking at the whole. And the whole of the matter is that we funded $4 billion towards agriculture and natural resources. And so I think it's important to look that there's also a breakdown in how we disperse those funds, and I've already talked about that in the Everglades restoration, the Springs Forever restoration project, and the beaches restoration. And I think that what you will find is a conflict of how much land that should be purchased. And I think that's where the real debate is, because I think oftentimes most people voted for that amendment thinking it was only going to be used to purchase land for conservation, and that's just not the case. There's a lot of other ways we can spend the money to conserve the land that we already own for a state, and the more land we take off our tax rolls, the greater burden there is on us, and also it takes a great deal of taxpayer money to maintain those lands, especially in South Florida, where certain plants are a nuisance and take a great deal of man hours to maintain. So I think it's important to have a conversation about what it looks to be what it looks like to be a good steward of our lands, and is it really the role of government to buy up all our land, or do we want people to have personal property rights and have the opportunity to be property owners?
I concur completely that buying endangered lands is a legitimate function and response to that amendment. But if you read that amendment carefully, it's not saying that the only thing you can do is buy land. And quite frankly, I think we miss some of the best bang for the buck when we don't spend more on water projects. I can tell you, every municipal water system in this state is probably leaking on the front end and the back end, doing more risk to the aquifer than us just buying more land. So I'm not opposed to buying more land, particularly certain endangered lands. But we really need to be looking at that whole question of what are we doing to address the care and conservation of our water and our endangered lands for the future. It should be much bigger than just how much do we spend on land. Thank you.
I'll briefly say, I'm not being rude and look at my phone. I don't have paper notes, so I was trying to look up numbers of what we spent on Senate 10, which is what we did last year, which worked on making sure that we secured the Everglades. And again, what Representative Sullivan and Senator Baxley said are exactly right. There's multiple ways to be conserving the lands of the state of Florida. 6th-generation Floridian. I want to have the lands we've always had. But we've protected our springs, and I couldn't find the numbers quickly enough. The numbers that we've put to protect our springs, the numbers that we spent on Senate Bill 10 to make sure that we have the right flow of the water and that we're not causing problems to the Everglades and the lands that surrounding, that we're not having runoff into the ocean that is causing major algae blooms. Those types of things we have done. And then both, I think Representative Metz is speaking on this too, but I know he agrees as well. Buying land is not just the solution to this problem.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. He's a judge now, be careful. All right, the next question comes from Alan Joyce from Claremont. Would you support a law restricting outdoor recreational shooting / target range so that the shooting does not occur within 1,500 feet of a residence unless a waiver from the affected residence is on file in county records? I live on 13 acres in Claremont area, and my neighbors shoot 500 feet from my home site, including automatic weapons. The noise is deafening, and we fear for our lives if they miss this 5-foot-high burn.
Can you repeat the question?
Sure. Would you support a law restricting outdoor recreational shooting target range so that the shooting does not occur within 1,500 feet of the residence unless a waiver from the affected resident is in file in the county records?
I believe it goes back to many of the discussions that we have in Tallahassee, whether it's talking about a shooting range, talking about vacation rentals, talking about multiple beaches and who can walk on land. It boils down to personal property rights. And you have purchased a property and you have personal property rights. Obviously, you have the responsibility not to endanger another individual. That would be murder or manslaughter. So those types of things can't happen. But you have personal property rights. So I tend to yield to the individual for their personal property rights. But the problem is my personal property right ends where yours begins, and frequently those two things overlap. So we can have a discussion of it's a serious problem that's happening widespread on how we can come in and try to do some things to address it. But bottom line, relationships with your neighbor, talking to your neighbor, some of those things can maybe solve some of these problems without government having to be involved.
I would also add to that, if the noise is one of the main issues, that oftentimes there's noise ordinances, and that may be something that, whether it's the sheriff's office that's called or your local county police department, depending on where your property is and whether it's a city or a county, that may also come to play.
Yeah, I would rather see approach that rather than a regulatory matrix. There's other ways to approach that. Disturbing the peace, endangerment of others. There are other things that we can do instead of laying out a metrics. What we don't want is a patchwork of different requirements to different communities, to different individuals, because as you travel the state, all you're doing is diminishing the property rights and A lot of these things we would need laws for if people would just be respectful of each other. And we need to learn how to be civil, respectful of our neighbors. And these things don't need to happen. So there's ways to deal with it. I would be hesitant to take the gun range control direction. I would rather take the direction that you're endangering other people, or you're creating a public nuisance, or you're creating a disturbance of the peace, or because that's really what it's about, is how are you treating your neighbors. It's not about whether you had a gun range or not. It's what you're doing there in a way that you're creating a hazard and a risk and a disturbance to the people that are your neighbors. And I think there's a number of ways to attach that rather than the gun range issue.
Okay. Randall Rainey from Claremont asks, Government Accountability. Senator Baxley, when are you going to file the OPAGA investigation on St. John's Water Management District and the Lake County Water Authority? I ask the delegation to support this. OPPAGA? Okay.
Yes, for those that are not familiar with that, it's the Office of Program and Policy Analysis. It's a research arm of the legislature that can research issues for us on different topics. And I have had a request from the Water Authority to do an OPAGA study on how we have expended funds and what we've accomplished. What happens here in Lake County is we have a number of entities that have a regulatory and an influence on water policy, almost to the patchwork level that I'm not sure what the mix are. It's almost like too many cooks in the soup. And very different ideas of what is the right way to manage these things. And so I'm still weighing that request, and I am sensitive to what the rest of the delegation thinks about requesting that. It can be a signal that we think something's wrong, or it can be a signal we just want to know what we've been doing and accomplishing and whether we're doing the right things. And and that will pretty much fall on the St. John's Water Management District to answer that research inquiry. I could only request it. It would actually be up to the President of the Senate or the Speaker to order or that request over to OPAGA. But it is a good study arm for us, and I have weighed it seriously. We have some specific areas that we're not sure we're accomplishing what we set out to accomplish. But at the same time, it's something I still need some more clarity to move forward on, that would be the right approach to producing an answer. I think there's also some public safety issues that we could deal with head on with some advice from the Corps of Engineers, and I'm working with some of the county commissioners about trying to get that input. So, yeah, water's a big, big deal here, and I'm very interested in pursuing it. If this delegation gives me feedback that they want to pursue it, I think it should be more than one of us, because some of the issues are in your district or my district or her district and this district. So, actually it's your district, folks.
Yeah.
All of those districts. And overlapping interest is something I've still been trying to get my head around. You actually, in Lake County, you actually have more people who have a hand in water control than so many of the other counties. So that's a long, rambling answer to that question. But yeah, I'm still trying to figure out if I should do that.
Okay, thank you. Ready for the next one? All right. Louise Grossman from Claremont. Now, this is a duplicate. It's already been answered, but I've been asked to read the questions anyway. Louise Grossman from Claremont asked, does the new gun law prohibit ownership of rifles or just purchasing them? And that has already been answered this evening. Chair Broadhurst from Leesburg. Common Core. Is Common Core a problem in Florida education? How do we eliminate or should we do so? We need to limit this to 2 answers because we're getting a little short on time.
Common Core is not been adopted in Florida. What we do have is the Sunshine State Standards. I am a supporter of standards. And then we also have an assessment to make sure that our students have learned those standards, and I also support an assessment as well to make sure the students are learning what we have expected them to be taught. But this notion that we're going to have a national standard with national curriculum that comes down and that's the way to educate our children, I do not support that, and I do not believe that that's a problem that we're facing in the state of Florida.
It is.
Anybody else? You can answer. One more person can answer. I didn't mean to totally cut you off. You done? Okay. Bob Johnson of Board of Directors of State Science Fair. He rewrote it for me. How sweet. Science Fair has asked for $143,000 to keep Sullivan 800 to 400 of Florida's best students compete. Many for state go on to international, where they place with California and New York. 1 million plus scholarships available at state. Senator Hayes saved the fair for 2 to 3 years ago. I'm not sure what the question is, but y'all may be able to figure that out. Okay.
Yeah, sitting on K through 12 appropriations, that's something that comes up as a reoccurring. Rather, I should say, it's not in our reoccurring budget, so each year it has to be sponsored, and that's something that the state has continued to invest in because we recognize the investment in our students in STEM. And so that's something I would be willing to continue to invest in because it yields much fruit and it's profitable for our students. I'm going to take the rest of my time, since that's the answer of that, to talk about my school district accountability bill, because I haven't gotten an opportunity to do that. And it was one of the #1 bills that I worked on. And there was, I want to correct myself earlier when we asked, I think someone said 46 cents on the dollar for students, and I said we raised it to $103 per student. It's actually only 101. And 50 cents. So I misspoke on that, and just for the record, I wanted to clarify. But what I will say, and whoever wrote that question, I think what you are onto is the fact that not all our school districts spend the money per student the same. There's some school districts that have far more spent in admin than spent in the classroom, and that's why my school district accountability bill is so important to me, because what we did through creating this online website portal that the DOE will be designing over the next year is making it visible for all of the public to see where the money is actually going. How many of you have tried to go to a school board website and look up their budget? Anybody? It is nearly impossible to actually tell where those dollars are going. It's all put on there, but it's not put in a means by which you can actually read, interpret, and as a policymaker, make good policy based out of it. So one of these things that this bill does is create this online tool. It also requires school boards to explain budget amendments at the next public hearing. So if the school board votes on a budget and they change their budget, they have to have a hearing on that. It also requires all out-of-state travel expenses to be approved at public meetings. There's great fiscal accountability measures, some of which are now requiring the Inspector General at the DOE to look into all fraud and waste, things that are brought to their attention. And it also prohibits elected superintendents from lobbying school board members for 2 years after they vacate the position, and it aligns school board member salaries with that of the first-year teacher salaries. These are just some of the highlights of what the bill does, but it's all about transparency and accountability, and also looking at the ratios. As some students leave a district, does their admin go down or does their admin go up? These are just a few of the things, of many of the things that this bill does to make it more transparent how school districts are actually spending their money, where, when, and on what.
I would just like to take this opportunity to thank Representative Sullivan for her work on that bill. I had a government accountability bill that I ran 5 years in a row, and Senator Stargel was my Senate sponsor on that bill for a number of those years. And one of the provisions in that government accountability bill was a section of statute being amended that would clarify and improve the authority of a school district to hire a district auditor, which we did in Lake County back in 2005, I believe it was. But the current law, or before the bill that Rep. Sullivan passed, it said that you could only hire that auditor for financial verification. That was all it said. So it's sort of like verifying the numbers. But the language in her bill, which was in my bill, but it actually improved in her bill, but I had language for 5 years in a row trying to improve this section of statute. It greatly increases the ability of that auditor to actually do real audits and real reviews and real performance audits and so forth. So I commend you for that, Representative Sullivan. language is in your bill. It's part of the law now. And I could not get it through with my government accountability bill, despite 5 years of trying. But we did give it all of our efforts. And thank you, Senator Stargel, for your great work as a sponsor on that. Thank you.
Okay, this is the last question, so we won't be taking any more questions. We only have 3 minutes, so you guys can fight over who's going to get that 3 minutes. Arm wrestle, whatever you want to do. Nicole Woodruff from Mineola. What kind of message are you sending to our 18 to 20-year-olds when you won't allow them to purchase a gun, but we will allow them to join the military and fight and die for the country? What is the message there?
Well, again, this became a break point for me, and it was hard because I agree with my colleagues. I'm not going to single issue these people here. They're good people who work very hard and are Second Amendment supporters. But we did have a tough time in this bill, and the fact is it concerned me. I guess the good news is that these restrictions don't do a lot. The bad news is they don't do a lot, so why are we doing them and taking away people's liberty? And I know that's not what they believe, and they want to do everything they can to keep everybody safe. And so it was hard to make a decision. But I feel like we're accepting somehow that the instrument of violence is the problem by passing these, and I don't know that we're getting a lot for that. Matter of fact, I'm very, very afraid of us sliding down the slippery slope that, Florida's turned around, and now we're going to start moving away from being the gun-shy state to taking everybody's rights away. And you hear the opponents. I mean, they're saying that wasn't good enough. There was people voting against that bill because they wanted a ban. And I'm telling you, I've studied this stuff. I'm the father of standing ground. I put a lot of heart into protecting your liberty on this subject. Not because I love firearms. I really don't. I don't have a lot of firearms. You know what I love? I love the freedom to take responsibility for yourself and others, and I think it makes us safer. And that's why it's a burden to me. And our members are going to need a lot of help because we're going to get pushed on this. I'm telling you we are. And I just don't want to go down that road because I truly believe that what I have seen in all of the data is that if you empower law-abiding people to stop violent acts, they can, they will, and they have. God bless you.
Okay, it is the witching hour at 7:20. Each legislator will have 2 minutes to provide some closing statements and say anything that you didn't get a chance to say when you had a question. We'll start with Senator Stargel.
Thank you. And also to build off of what Senator Baxley just said, we all have to work together in this process. I've run a bill for the last few years dealing with allowing weapons to be at churches. That is not a gun-free zone. You're allowed to take your gun to church. But if there's churches attached to a school, you cannot take your gun to that church. Tried to fix that issue in the Florida Senate last term. Got it passed to the Senate. We did not get it passed to the House. I actually had to compromise to get it out of the Senate. But the bill, at the end of the day, we would have been able to take a gun to church and protect those rights. It didn't pass out of the House and the Senate. So now that happens. If there's a church with a school attached to it, you cannot have your gun at church. I filed that bill again this year. It died in the committee because we did not compromise. Senator Baxley filed the same bill. He had to, again, also compromise that bill. The problem that we have at the end of the day is that we have to work together and we have to get things done. We can't just hold and say my way or the highway because people don't agree with me 100%. We don't do it always the way that I would want. So we worked on a compromise, but as you've heard from the testimony up here today, that compromise did not take away people's rights. It did not take away the ability of an 18 to 20-year-old to have, own, operate, and actually even purchase a private weapon. It did increase the ability for our children at school to have more resources at that school, more people who are on those campuses who are able to have a weapon and protect those children. And a big piece of what it did is we left the legislature with a large segment of the state of Florida feeling they are safer because of what we did up there. And that was a big goal for me because we had children across the country basically rioting that they did not feel safe at school. And we passed legislation in 3 weeks, and I am proud of the legislation that we got done, and I will stand beside it because it was something that was making our children feel safer at school, and it made our nation feel safer.
You know, I do have a soft side. Jeanette and I have 5 kids. 3 our big kids give us 8 grandkids. But Jeanette and I adopted 2 kids. Jeff was a shaken baby, 8 months old. And I have a big soft spot for kids that get abused. And one thing that came to my attention this year is the Brevard Sheriff and some of his investigators came to me and said, look, we got a problem. We have child abusers, pornographers, that will put these kids on film, do things to them, and then the vendors have to tell us, and we start an investigation. Well, when we get an investigative subpoena, then they notify the account holder that they're being investigated, and they go destroy all the evidence. And these can be multiple states. And this was hard because it gets into the whole privacy issue of people's stuff. But I'm telling you, as a grandfather of 8, 5 of them are little girls, I was so determined that we were going to do something to stop them being notified, and that we would have a delay of 160 days before they were notified, so that we had time to maybe save that child. And those were cases that they had worked on where literally there was endangerment of a child being killed to destroy evidence. So I don't know what else I did that was wonderful, but I know I got to touch something there that meant so much to me. If we're not going to protect little innocent kids who are being abused by a whole society, it's sick what our society is doing to small children, 3-year-olds, 11-year-olds. And by God, we passed that thing. And we're going to stop that. Thank you for sending me.
Well, I just want to say once again, this is probably the last time that this delegation will come to a meeting where I'm a part of it. The next time it comes together will be after the election, likely. And I want to just say once again, thank you. It's been an honor and a privilege to be a member of this delegation and to represent my constituents in Tallahassee for the past 8 years. I think the county's in good hands with the members that are returning next year, and there will be 2 new members joining as well. One replacing the late Representative Don Hahnfeldt and one replacing me. So I just want to say again, thank you, and I think we're going to recognize Representative Hahnfeldt at the end here. Correct, Madam Chair? Yes. So I just want to mention him in passing, but we will come back to him at the end of the program, I believe, for a moment of silence. So again, I want to just thank you all for everything that you've done for me, allowed me to be part of the legislature for the last 8 years, and God bless all of you. Thank you very much.
All right.
In the 4 years that I've been at the legislature and had the honor of representing you, I voted on 18 different policies that gave greater rights, protections, and freedoms to gun owners. I voted no on 30 different gun restricting amendments during the course of the debate in committees and on the House floor. And I voted no against a procedural vote that would have pulled the bill from committee to vote on AR-15s, full out banning them, which I don't think is the solution. I didn't make this vote out of fear, but rather out of responsibility to protect our kids, to fix areas where government failed us, to fund what is the reality of the mental health crisis facing our state, and to end gun-free zones in our schools. I've consistently voted every single time I've had the opportunity to end gun-free zones. I know that there are things in this bill that you don't like. There are things in this bill that I don't like. And at the end of the day, I understand why people are upset. There are provisions of this bill that I really wish weren't in there. I actually fought really hard behind closed doors to get out. What you don't know is how hard I fought to keep the private sale so that 18, 19, and 20-year-olds could actually still own a gun. And what's interesting is as I've been in the district, I've heard from only one person in that age group who was upset. I got thousands of calls that were for this and against this bill when I was in Tallahassee. None of them from the age group, and I know most of them. They weren't upset. You know why they weren't upset? Because the vast majority are given a gun by their parents, whether it's birthday or Christmas. I own a gun. I'm a concealed carry permit holder. I was given my gun. Most people are that age. So I just ask you, I understand if you're upset, but I hope that you will take the time to read the bill, that you won't read the paper because they certainly didn't get it right on this one, and that if you have any other questions, you'll take the forms in the back. I have my bill summary and summary of public safety, and that you'll read up on what we actually did. Thank you for your continued support.
I mentioned in my closing remarks that we had lost Don Hahnfeldt from the Villages. Don was a stellar individual. He was a career Navy man, commanded nuclear submarines during his time in the Navy, and then he served on the Sumter County Commission for a number of years, and then he was elected in 2016 to replace Representative Marlene O'Toole. So all of us got a chance to work with him for about a year. He tragically passed away on Christmas Eve of 2017. And we were all shocked to hear that news. So I just thought it would be appropriate. He was a member of our delegation. The last time we had a meeting was November 27th when we heard the local bill that I sponsored, and he was there at that time. And I had really good conversations with Representative Hahnfeldt on a number of issues. He was a very good person. I just think it would be appropriate, Madam Chair, with your approval, to have a moment of silence in recognition of Representative Don Hahnfeldt. So if you could please rise and observe a moment of silence for him. Thank you.
All right. I wanted to thank everybody who came out tonight. I really appreciate the decorum in the room was fantastic. I want to thank Jennifer for allowing me to be the moderator this evening. And I want to thank the legislators for all their answers and how well they handled themselves this evening. And it was fantastic. And I would also like to thank the officers from Lake County Sheriff's Office SWAT team who are in the room tonight. So, they didn't have to do anything, which is great. So everybody drive safe and have a great evening. Thank you.